Hi everyone, my name is Phaedra and this is our channel, Phaedra Gardeness. We have a flower farm in the lower end of Australia. We have high rainfall, hot summers, cold winters, and we also have a florist business called Noble Flowers attached to our flower farm, and that's how we make money. And what I'm here today to talk to you about is, can you afford to have a flower farm? So we'll go through a few different things to consider when making a decision if you can jump straight into flower farming or you need to wean your way into it, or if you want to do it at all. So let's get straight into it. The first thing to really consider is your household budget. And so you may look at your budget weekly or fortnightly or monthly, and it may depend on how you're currently being paid. And I know in some countries the payment comes through monthly, which I would find very difficult. We get paid weekly or fortnightly here in Australia. But work out what works best for you. And there's heaps of tools online to help you work this out. There's heaps of free budgeting tools. So I actually do a yearly budget, and I break it down, weekly, what are our weekly expenses? Monthly, what are our monthly expenses? We pay our electricity bill monthly. And then we will look at yearly. So yearly expenses for us are things like insurances, registrations, permits for the business. So what is life costing you right now? You need to know that. You need to have that figure in mind. And it actually doesn't hurt to have this, because sometimes down the track when you're applying for other things, they want to know what your budget is. So if you've already got it, you already know what your budget is, and it saves a step later on. Something else to consider in this category is, do you have any savings? And if you don't have savings, will you get some savings before you start this venture? Or if you do have savings, how much savings do you have? Now that you've looked at how much it costs you to survive for a week or a month, work out how long it takes you to survive for a year from that, and then figure out how long are these savings going to last you if you made no money, or if your business was only covering your costs for the first year or so. How long can you survive for on those savings? And then the other thing to think about is, once you've got to that point, you might have, let's say, $40,000 worth of savings. And I don't know how long that'll last you. Let's say that's enough to last you a year to survive, right? Are you prepared to lose that $40,000 to start a flower farm? And that's a really important one, because you can just go into this completely blind, not realizing how much it costs you to survive, not realizing how quickly savings are going to disappear, and you may not be prepared to do that. The other side of the coin is, you might think, right, we've got a year's worth of savings behind us. We've got a year to get this set up and making profit. And you may then be very, very tight with your budget to make sure that those savings do stretch for a year. Now, what we did, we quit our jobs and we just went all in. We did one practice season, and it was a very small sort of practice season. We kind of tested the water. We thought about how we might actually sell these flowers. We made sure we could actually grow flowers, and then we just went all in. So the fact that we had no backup meant that we had to push ourselves. We had to make this work. You may not be prepared to do that. I'll talk about that in a little bit. The low risk option would be, you've already got your income, you've got a job, and you set the farm up while you're still working. It is a lot of work. It will probably take you longer, but it does take that financial risk out of starting a farm. It also probably means, unless your current job is only just enough to survive on, if it's more and you're have been able to save money, or you've been able to live a bit more of an exciting life, you can cut back on that exciting life and start investing money into setting up the farm. I sort of feel like when you're building a farm, you've either got time or money. And back when we did it, we didn't have the money. We had savings, but it was enough for us to just survive off. We didn't want to have to actually use savings to build the farm. So we made money, and then we used that money to invest back in the farm. We just had a different model that we actually made profit from the first year that we went all in. I'll talk about that in a little bit too. But if you're not prepared to take those risks, or you can't take those risks, you can set the farm up while you're still working, and it does eliminate a lot of those risk factors. If you're not into budgets, you don't want to have to be budgeting, you probably can do that without having to budget. We'll talk about some other things that are going to need to be in place first. The next really big thing to think about is resources and tools. You need to think about, what do I already have that is going to be beneficial for this business? In some cases, you may have an education. Moroni is an agronomist, and he also has a business degree. So we had education behind us already. I've been gardening for years. Moroni's been gardening for years. We've got skills and experience. If you don't have those, you can learn as you go, but that's also an asset that you need to take into account. What education do you have that's going to help you on this farm? Other sorts of resources to think about are things like, what is your actual living situation? Do you already own land? Do you have any tools that are going to help you work that land? Even basic things, like if you had to go out and buy a full set of tools such as shovels, forks, hand tools, if you had to go out and buy all that stuff, it is going to cost you a little bit just to start up at a basic level. So you need to take that into account. In most cases, most people can probably afford to go out and do that. If you can't, you're going to have to find other ways to obtain those tools. And sometimes I even see people giving them away in Facebook groups, the buy, swap, sell, or we've got a free cycle group locally. People just want to get rid of stuff. You might be able to build up some tools that way. Other things to consider are, what if you've got land already, what does the fencing look like? Is it going to keep animals out? Is it going to keep other people's animals off your property? So really good fencing between you and, say, a neighbour who has sheep or cattle. You also want to think about, how will you water the flowers? That is a resource you're going to need to figure out before you start. You need a water source. If you only have mains water and you're paying for your water, you might want to have a look at how much is it going to cost you to pay for all this water, because in some cases the water bills can become so high that the money you've made from the flowers doesn't even cover the water bill. So you do need to do a little bit of research, and that is something to think about. Otherwise, if you've got dams or you've got tanks that you can set up and water from tanks, there's a lot of different ways to water a farm, but you do need to have a way to do that. An exercise you can do to sort of work this out is to write a list of all of the tools and resources you already have, and then a list of the things you don't have that you would need or that you want. And then what you do is you order those. So the stuff that you've already got, you don't need to worry about. You've already got it. The stuff you don't have but you feel you need, you start putting those in a list of priority, from top to bottom. And a little story, something that we learned. So here's a little story about that. We thought we needed a tractor, but we didn't have the money for it. We did not want to take it off our savings because we were worried that we needed to live off our savings. And we also didn't want to have a loan. So no tractor for us. We spent the first 3 seasons building everything by hand, and it was 2 plots that we did by hand. So the third plot right up the back, we got a tiller at that point. But we thought we needed this tractor. And because we couldn't get one, time sort of went on. We could have built things so much quicker if we had a tractor, but we could actually scale up slowly at a pace that we could manage because we didn't have a tractor. So it actually worked out really good that we didn't have one. And we're now at a point where it would be nice to have one, but we don't actually need one. So if we do get a tractor, it'll be great. We can do a lot of things a lot quicker. But in terms of the flower beds, they're done. We don't actually want a tractor in on that area now because we don't want the ground to get compacted from how heavy a tractor is. So things like that, the slow pace that you may need to build at isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I'm saying this from a perspective where we built at a slow pace, but we actually supported a family of 5 at the same time. So just do that list, figure out what you need, put your priority list, and really think about this thing that's at the top of my priority list. Do I really need it, or can I manage in another way for now and pop that further down the list? You may not actually need it, especially for items that are big ticket items like a tractor. The next thing to consider before starting is debt. So you really need to be honest with yourself about how much debt you have and what type of debt you have. If you've got a lot of debt going into this and you're taking a risk that you're going to make enough money, those debts need to go into that budget. You need to know how much you need to be paying off. And I'm not a financial advisor, but I would just say, because I know I've been through it, I know how much stress it is, hoping that you can make enough money off flowers. We didn't have a whole heap of debt to begin with, so we didn't have to worry about covering debt. It was a bit lower risk for us. But if you do have debt, that is something that you need to consider also. The next is grit. So as a person, do you have what it takes to survive something like this? Farming is incredibly challenging at times. It's very rewarding. Like, don't get me wrong, we absolutely love this lifestyle. We really, really love it. It was the best thing that we've done. We made a really good decision doing this. But you do have to be able to deal with certain things. Like, you need to be able to deal with how unpredictable the weather is, and it can really mess up your plans. It can mess up your income. It can really be hard. Like, you need to be prepared to work out in all weather conditions. And one of the strategies for that is you've got to have the right clothing. So that's something that you need to put at the top of that tools list. You need to have, the wet weather gear, warm gear, clothing that protects you from the sun. Like, you need the right gear to be able to farm in. But the weather is a big factor, and it can become a little bit sort of depressing at times because you've just got to push through no matter what happens. A question to ask yourself is, how long do you usually stick to something when it's really, really hard? When you can't see an end to it, can you push through? Are you the type of person that just keeps going despite that? And I think that's a trait that is very handy in a business like this. How do you handle stress? How do you handle heavy disappointments? How do you handle rejection? Just think about those things. If they're things that you can work on and you think will be fine, then, going all in or really putting your heart and soul into this will be fine. If they're things that you just feel like you want to throw the towel in, there's a high risk that that's going to happen. Those kinds of things are going to happen that will really push you to your limit. Our first year was actually quite easy. First probably 2 were very easy. Then we had flooding problems. We had really bad weather and had to deal with a lot of flooding, and we kind of missed an entire season. Our backup plan, because we had to make money, this was our family's income, but our backup is we also use number one, we have a florist business, and when we don't have our own flowers growing, we're purchasing in flowers from a wholesaler, and that's how we operate all year, and it really does reduce the stress. So if you're needing to make money from this, you're probably going to need some way to ensure that you've got another income running from this if your own flowers aren't working out. Something that I realized about grit is you need to be prepared to do and try things that others aren't prepared to fail on. Not a lot of people are doing this because it is really hard and it is a bit risky. And we walked away. We didn't walk away from careers. We actually walked away from jobs that we kind of didn't really like. So for us, we sort of thought to ourselves, what does it really matter? If it doesn't work out, we can just go find another job. But we didn't really want to go back and work for someone else. So it really pushed us to make this work and figure out a formula to make sure that we had money coming in. So you need to sort of think about that. Have a bit of a plan. Have a plan about who you're going to sell the flowers to. And this kind of leads me into the next point, which is other circumstances. And these are unique to you. It's things like, for us, we see so many people selling flowers via a roadside stand. And there's lots of belief out there that anyone can do this. You've just got to have the right marketing in place to do it. Whereas for us, we live in Australia. Our population is tiny compared to, say, the US. We've got a smaller population in our entire country than what the one state of California has in the US. We don't have a densely populated country. So our roads don't have, especially out in the country, they're just not full of cars. Even in the cities, they are pretty busy, but they're just not, it's not the same. And for us, we live in this little pocket surrounded by rolling hills. It's like a tourist drive area, but there's not a whole heap of traffic. If we had a farm stand, we really feel like we would be wasting our time trying to do that, especially even if we were doing all the marketing that we could do. It's just not a location that lends itself to a roadside stand. We'd also have to have it way down the road because we're up tucked in an area that nobody goes past. We'd have to put it down the road. It is a really complicated setup for us to do that. So that's the sort of thing you need to think about. And despite what anybody else is telling you that you can or can't do, you need to really be honest with yourself about what you think you really can do, and then go chase the most likely option based on how you feel about things. Something else to consider is the economy and the spending habits in your area. And there are differences in areas, and there's differences in countries, there's differences in the way people spend, and it changes throughout the year as well. So it is something that in time you do learn, but you may already know something about your particular area or circumstances that could impact the decisions you make about how you move forward with this. Something really cool I heard recently, and I just can't remember who said it, but they were just talking about competition. And competition, you don't get to choose your competition. It's going to exist. If this is something you wholeheartedly want to do and there's 4 other flower farms in your area, you can just go for it. You don't get to choose your competition, and neither do they. And in the end, the cream rises to the top. You've just got to set your values in place, do a really good job, like treat people well, have great customer service. There's things that you can do that ensure that your business has a really good reception from the public. And yeah, I agree with that. The cream rises to the top, and it's not always a fast process, but that's why I say you need this grit to just keep pushing forward if this is what you really want to do. So maybe you're like us and you want to just quit everything and jump right in, and you've looked at all these things and you can do it. Like it's going to work out that you have the ability to do that, and that will be amazing. I hope it goes so well for you. And if you don't though, there is nothing wrong with taking it slow and testing the water before you sort of throw the towel in on everything else. It's okay to say to everybody, hey, I'm starting a flower farm. You run it for a season or a couple of seasons. You probably need more than one season to know if it's going to work. The first season, it'll just feel like you know nothing. So, but whatever, like it is your life. You don't have to appeal to anybody else with this or anybody else's ideal life, and it's not going to make sense to everybody, but you do need to find your own path and the avenue that's going to work best for you. Maybe you've got a backyard, just a suburban backyard, and you want to grow flowers and sell them out the front of your house, or you want to sell them to a local cafe, or you just want to supply a florist at one time of year with one variety of flowers. Say you pop peonies in and that's going to be your crop because you just love them and that's what you want to do. There's so many different ways to go about this and to turn your love of flowers into something profitable. I mentioned at the beginning, our business model is we have the flower farm and we have a florist business, a retail florist business. We looked into selling wholesale. It wasn't working out for us, and we couldn't grow enough to actually make profit on that from the beginning. And we needed to make profit. We needed to make enough money for our family to survive. So we chose to sell retail, and the easiest way for us to sell retail was to set up a florist business, and that's what we did. Maybe you don't want to have a florist business, but what I'm saying is there's many ways to make money from flowers. I know flower farmers who grow the flowers, they get all the beautiful pictures, but they actually just sell seed. They don't sell the flowers, they keep it all for seed, which is a whole other topic. It's a very sort of specialized field, and it's a bit more complicated than just saving the flowers for seed. But I really wish you all well. I would love to hear in the comments what you're thinking you might do and what your plans are. I have a Patreon where we get together once a month and we chat about what we're doing and kind of troubleshoot things together, and that's really fun. So you can head over there and have a look at that. I also have a mentoring tier that's one-on-one, and it is sort of intensive help to get things started with your flower farm or your florist business, or even with YouTube. So check those out, and I hope this has been helpful. I would love to hear comments. I'd love to hear if there's anything else that you think I've missed that you think people should be considering. Put it in the comments below, and I will see you next time.